What's going on, guys? Welcome to another video. This time we're doing some Remnant. I plan on doing a challenge run this time. Rule is to only use the hunting rifle for damage. Sounds simple, winds up being quite a troublesome task to do later in the game. Rules are pretty simple. I can only deal damage with the hunting rifle. This means no melee and no mod damage outside of directly buffing my gun. This directly goes into Rule 2. Mods are allowed. However, I can't use things like Shrapnel Shot and I can't use Summons. The only mods I can do are the ones that directly buff me or are directly a part of my gun. So things like Hot Shot and Song of Swords are both allowed. Rule number 3, I have to do every encounter. Can't skip anything. Nothing is skipped. I have to do optional bosses, I have to do optional encounters, I have to do everything. And the final rule is that account-wide items are banned. If I were to use some account-wide items, this game would be way too easy. Black Rose Necklace is busted, Ring of Supremacy is really strong, and the Talisman of Perseverance would let me overlevel myself way too fast. With those rules out of the way, off to the first encounter. Now I will preface this real fast by saying I plan on skipping most of the overworld. Not a lot of overworld stuff is too interesting, and I didn't even really manage to find all that cool stuff while I was in the overworld. A lot of the gear I found wound up being in the dungeons themselves. But without further ado, our first boss was Gorefist. Classic Gorefist. Now Gorefist is pretty easy, as being the first boss of the game is. If you have any experience with timing your dodges properly, he's not too complicated. The only problem you can have with this guy is losing track of his adds and they one-shot you. Now, I will say this did take me a couple attempts, but it wasn't that bad. I was just a little rusty at the game, it's been a little bit, I was just getting back into it. But with enough perseverance, we managed to get through it pretty easy enough, and we move on. Next thing that we encounter is a dude with a crazy mask. Now this guy's pretty funny. Originally, you're supposed to use his mask to talk to a tree, and you get a perk, and this was my thought process, so I wanted the mask from him. Shot him in the face. Unfortunately, I forgot that my overworld encounter was not the tree, it was Mudtooth. So this guy got shot in the face for no reason. But after that, we go visit Mudtooth. Good old Mudtooth. I love Mudtooth, man. He's a good, cool character. He actually has a lot of interesting stuff to say if you ever actually try and listen to the stuff he says. I've listened to a lot of it, skip through the dialogue, and get the pocket watch he gives me. It's pretty good, actually. Really good for stamina. And it winds up being useful for quite some time. After this encounter with Mudtooth, we go to the church. Now the church is my least favorite section on Earth. I hate the church, man. The church is horrible. It's so inconsistent. The enemies don't always aggro to you properly. They clip through walls. It's obnoxious. It's 2 minutes of just annoying sieging. It's so obnoxious. But after a couple attempts, we managed to get lucky enough to get the right spawns. We hit our shots, aggro the boss, not boss. We aggro the brute like we're supposed to, and the timer expires and the room clears itself. Thank goodness. I hate the church. So obnoxious. But after getting through the little bit of overworld trouble we had, we make it to the next dungeon. I do want to show off this one, besides this one elite encounter that I got, dungeon wasn't too interesting. But this elite's pretty rare, actually. You don't really ever see him. I believe he's called the Vampire, and he's pretty cool. Unfortunately, he doesn't know how to deal with bullets, so I shoot him in the face till he dies. Other than that, there's nothing too interesting. I just wanted to show off that cool elite. He's pretty cool. One of my favorite. And with that, we move on to the next boss, this tiny, cute little tumbleweed. Okay, maybe he's not tiny. My bad. Regardless, the boss is super simple. He rolls around in circles. If you roll him into walls, he stuns himself. He goes into the ground and summons a lot of his little buddies. And other than that, he doesn't really do all that much. Not a really interesting boss, honestly. The hunting rifle shines here. It's really good at killing off his creeps. And as long as you keep things in check and don't lose track of where the boss is, he can't really do anything. He doesn't have really any good main attacks, it's just his roll attack, which he stuns himself all the time. Even when you're not paying attention, he'll stun himself on accident sometimes. So after a couple tries, we managed to get through it. Now the next event I get before I get to the final boss of Earth is a Siege Survival. Now this is quite interesting. I personally don't get this event very often, but siege moments are always really easy for the hunting rifle. It's very, very good at dealing with hordes of creeps, and as long as you're careful with your positioning and make sure you don't get overwhelmed and hit your shots, it's not too complicated. And we do just that. It does take us a couple of tries, but we find a good spot to camp out in, we hit our shots, and we make it through. Now unfortunately, a lot of the time, the rewards aren't going to be useful, and this is a case for that as well, because the reward for this area winds up being an armor set, but it's all good. I'm not upset about the fact that I have gotten nothing but one ring this entire run. It's okay. With the Siege Survival out of the way and completed, we finally make it to the final boss of Earth, Singe. Singe is quite the easy boss, if I'm being entirely honest with you. He shoots fireballs, he has a flamethrower-like attack where he just sweeps the area on fire and sets everything on fire. He has an ad that he summons, the Emulator. It's a pretty easy elite, sets himself on fire and runs at you. It's kind of crazy, but nothing too complicated. The issue with Singe is one thing that I'll have for the rest of the run starting this point. Now the hunting rifle is quite a strong weapon in all honesty. It's got good damage, good ammo, its reload is bad, and its ammo capacity is horrible. This weapon is designed to thrive in the overworld. It's not meant to be used for bosses. Throwing this into a boss fight and you quickly realize the problem. You run out of ammo very fast. And from this point forward, just understand that whenever I do a boss, I'm blowing through 2 to 3, maybe 4 ammo boxes before I actually manage to take the boss down. But other than Singe being incredibly bulky for a boss, he's not too complicated. On our second try, we managed to get through it. And with that, Earth is done. With Earth out of the way, we make our way to Rom. Now first, we've got to enter the labyrinth and talk to the Keeper. Tells us a bit about the Guardians, about the lore of this universe. It's pretty interesting stuff. And then we go to the labyrinth. The labyrinth lets us get to Rom. Rom is a massive desert planet, and it's quite interesting in my opinion. It also brings up a first problem we're going to have in this run, and it's the fact that the dungeons are crazy. Now, there's not too much to bring up about them still, other than the fact that they pretty much double in size ever since Rom is a planet, and whenever you go through them, you're gonna get swarmed by pretty much everything under the sun. But other than that, it's not too complicated. The first encounter we get is actually another Siege Survival. Makes the third one we've had to do already. But luckily for us, this one's pretty easy. Now all we have to do is start the event, and my little trick for this area is to go to the top right corner of the map. And if you go into that section, the enemies only have one way of getting to you, and you have a long hallway to shoot down on. As long as you're hitting your shots and you're careful with your reloading timings, easy cleanup and an easy room. So we clear the room, longingly at the beam rifle, never use, cry yourself to sleep, and to move on. Now the main reason I'm doing my best to skip most of the gear and not pick it up is because of the way Remnant's upgrade system works. Remnant only shows you the iron that you need to upgrade. So if you need iron, you're only gonna get iron. If you need iron, but you also need forged iron, you're mainly gonna get iron and a little bit of forged iron. The more forged iron you need, the more you'll see of it. So if you have a lot of stuff if you have one piece of gear that's really high level and the rest of it's low level, you're not gonna see very much of that high level resource. Now the next encounter we have on this planet is actually one of my favorite encounters on Rom. It's a pack of dogs. Now, Maul is not too complicated of a boss, but what makes him so interesting is that before the fight, you can actually talk to the pack leader, and you can buy some stuff off him. In fact, this is an optional boss fight. Fortunately, it's not optional for us because we chose violence. However, you can skip it if you don't want to fight him. Now, this dude is a triple whammy. He's a merchant, he gives you a quest item, and he gives you a boss fight. To thank him for all of his service and all of the coolness he gives us, we shoot him in the face and watch the dogs eat him. Now Maul as a boss fight is not actually that complicated, and in fact the hunting rifle is once again going to be amazing for this fight. Now Maul as a fight is not too complicated, it's pretty simple, however it's very high intensity. It's a very big area, but that doesn't really matter because all it does is make it more complicated to keep track of all the mobs he summons. Now the whole thing with this is that he's always charging you, and he's always summoning dogs to charge you. So it's a juggling act between making sure you're doing enough damage to the boss to make progress while also keeping a number of adds down so that way you don't get overwhelmed. As I said, the hunting rifle is great here because it one-shots the dogs and does good damage to the boss since the boss isn't too tanky. After 1 or 2 attempts, we managed to get through it. We pick up the troll rod that the boss drops for the alternate kill that we did since we shot the dude in the face. We're going to need that later for an optional fight that we have to do. Now this next section gives me a lot of trouble. Now I love Remnant. I've played this game a lot since it first came out, and I've continued to play it to this day. Even so, there are 3 bosses in this game that I hate. One of them is the Harrow. Now the Harrow is pretty simple on paper. Hulking behemoth that slowly walks on you, and if you're not careful, he's gonna kill you. He also has this crazy charge attack that you gotta watch out for that he uses to make up the distance if you get far away from him. And every once in a while, he'll summon a huge wave of adds to come and overwhelm you. The reason this boss is so problematic is the way that he summons his adds. Now this boss runs in 2 scenarios. Either A, you do enough damage to stagger him and it scares him off, or B, he loses line of sight of you for too long. The real problem is option B, because when he runs the first time, there's a chance that when he drops back into the field, he drops so far away that by the time you're done clearing out the first wave of adds, he's decided that he's gonna run again. And this happens a lot. On top of the fact that the boss is very bulky, once again, everything in that room one-shots you. The arena itself is very, very dangerous because there's an upstairs and a downstairs. You never want to be downstairs. It winds up being a huge problem. This wound up being another bit of a roadblock. Not too bad. Technically, there is actually a way to make it to where he never runs, but this is super inconsistent, especially in single player. So I'm not able to actually utilize this very much. I use it to the best of my abilities. If you pace out your damage, you can make it to where he never staggers, and if you keep line of sight of him, he won't run. So you can make it to where he will never summon his adds. A little bit of careful micromanaging of my damage and pacing it out a little bit after dealing with his adds and making sure he doesn't run another time, we managed to get through it. Thank God, I hate that fight. Next boss isn't nearly as noteworthy. It's Ray's. He's this diamond-shaped looking cube-looking thing. Diamond and cube is not the same thing, I don't know why I said that. And all he does is shoot fire at you and summon skulls. This isn't too noteworthy. Skulls are always one-hit kills with the hunting rifle, so it's once again pretty useful here. And Raze himself isn't really all that crazy. His firebolts don't deal a whole lot of damage, but they do apply a hard-hitting dot that will kill you if you're not careful. But they're not too difficult to dodge. He's pretty bulky. It's pretty annoying because he likes to dive into his water a lot, and you can't get him while he's in the water. With a little bit of patience and a little bit of micromanaging, we get through without too much trouble. Now the next boss fight is technically optional as well. When we grab the control rod from Maul, it let us activate the Ancient Construct. Now the Ancient Construct is not a difficult fight, but it is pretty interesting, because he's one of the only boss fights in the game that has hit scan as part of an attack. This is annoying, but it's also not too complicated to deal with. As long as you're able to keep track of the turrets, and if you're actually able to stick closer to the boss, he'll go for melee attacks more often and will not summon turrets nearly as often. You can use this to your advantage to reduce the difficulty of the boss a little bit. This did take me a few tries because I'm stubborn and I still have the Ring of the Admiral on, but after I got through this boss, I took it off, and we made it through it no problem. While I'm at the Ancient Construct, I did talk to the merchant, and I grabbed myself the Jewel of the Black Sun, which low-key became the best item for me in this run. This item saved me so many times. It's crazy how good this ring is. In the overworld, it made it so much easier to get through. In sieges, it's so good. In dealing with mobs, it's so good. Next fight will prove exactly that. However, we do have to make it through one more area before we get to the end of Rom. This area is not too much to talk about. All it was a little dungeon segment, and then we got to the end where we had to put in a bunch of glowing rods to get some armor pieces. This event's really annoying, because if you're not careful, you can miss a glowing rod, and then you just can't get the armor. but I brought it up anyways just because it was the event of the day. Clear the dungeon and we move on. Now the next fight is also optional, but it's also the final boss of Rom. Now, talk to the Undying King, and he's supposed to send you to Corsus to where you can kill the beast of that area and come bring it to. He'll give you a key so you can get to Ford, or you could just fight him and kill him. Now, because of rule number 2, I have to fight and kill him. I also don't like him, so I wanted to shoot him anyways. He's actually quite the complicated boss. He's got a lot to him. But once you understand how it works, it's not that bad. Got a lot of summons and a lot of attacks. First thing to take note of is the fact that he can summon more guards from the walls to the right and left. They're not too bad. They can be killed pretty easily with a hunting rifle, so it winds up not being that big of a problem. Also has the ability to summon orbs, which he will typically do in tandem with summoning his guards from the side, so I've got to be very careful about that. Very easy to get overwhelmed with this boss, but as long as you're keeping your eye on this guy and you're keeping everything in mind, not too bad. Just make sure you're hitting your shots, because if you miss your shots, you'll get overwhelmed. Third thing you can do is actually switch forms and switch to melee. In this form, he will slowly walk at you, but every so often he will jump at you. Do not get baited by this jump. If you roll as soon as he jumps at you, he's guaranteed to hit you, and it's a one-hit kill. Other than that, he's got one more thing where after a certain amount of damage, he will put away all of his weapons, summon a bunch of swarms at you, and walk up and start healing. It's imperative that you get up next to him and deal with all the ads before you start shooting him. This was actually a bit of a problem at first. They had just enough health to not get one shot by my hunting rifle, and I couldn't upgrade it more at the time. This is where that Jewel of the Black Sun came in handy. With the Jewel of the Black Sun, I was able to get just enough damage to be able to utilize my one-shot potential and keep the crowd control under wraps. It did take me a few attempts. I did mess up quite a bit here. A little frustrated because this isn't typically a boss I get stuck on. But with me realizing that the Jewel of the Black Sun is amazing here, and dealing with all the swarms in the right order, I managed to get through it pretty easily. And with that, Rom is done. Now, this all being taken into consideration, technically, Corsus is an entirely optional planet. You never have to go there. You kill Eslon the Undying King, you can just take the key off his corpse and go straight to the Forest Planet. However, I decided that I have to go there anyways because rule number 2, do everything. Now, Corsus, believe it or not, is my favorite planet. Or at least as it is now. Release Corsus was horrible. It was boring, it was empty, and it was a miserable slog. New Corsus is a lot of fun. Now, Corsus is one of the few planets where some of the fights are guaranteed. The Unclean One is not a complicated fight, but he's also a fight you do every single time you play the game. Every run you do, you will always fight this guy. Honestly, he's one of the easiest boss fights in the game, and because of this, it doesn't take us very long to put him down. He does a few things. He's very slow, but he has a lot of charge attacks. So as long as you roll out of the way of these charge attacks, it's pretty easy. There are 2 attacks you will have to be careful for. He will sometimes throw his hammer at you, which can be a little off-putting compared to what his normal attacks are. And the other one is he will sometimes spin in circles a lot. Now, this circle spin is really dangerous for a multitude of reasons. First and foremost, it's really hard to shoot him. The Unclean One is covered in armor, so if you miss your shots while he's spinning, he will catch up to you and kill you. So it's my recommendation that unless he's already almost dead, you just wait for him to stop spinning, keep your distance, take care of the room, and then bide your time. So while he's spinning, I highly recommend that you just take care of the ads. But with all this being said, we take our time, shoot his weak point, avoid the armor pieces, and he's an easy fight. Since we've decided to come to Corsus, I decided to show a visit to the Queen. She does wind up giving me a lot of gear that I can't use, and it dilutes the pool a little bit, but it's also a quest that I can complete for a good amount of experience, and the experience and scrap is something that I value more, so while we're here, we might as well help give her the heart. Now, this next area is probably the most dangerous area in the entire game, in my personal opinion. Ever since they updated Corsus, this area is scary. The Hall of Whispers is one of the few dungeons that I don't recommend going to if you can avoid it, because it's always problematic. It's got every box checked. It's a huge area, it's got a lot of swarmy enemies that can overwhelm you if you're not careful, and its elites are also tough. And to top it all off, at the end of this dungeon, is quite a fun boss, actually. It's one of my favorites. The most difficult part about this area is the arena itself. It's very small for what you're supposed to be dealing with, and it's full of holes. It is not uncommon to roll to avoid an attack, and either A, fall into a hole, or B, roll into a wall and die anyways because you didn't go anywhere. The Dream Eater himself is quite simple. He has a basic charge attack that every one of his kind has. He also has the ability to summon a clone of himself that will do more advanced attacks the lower on health he gets, so you gotta be careful of that and keep that in mind. There's also his ability to summon clones of himself that when you shoot them, they will pop open, shoot a little orb at you that you can dodge. And he has the ability to do this crazy attack where he flies into the air, summons tons of clones of himself, and you've got to shoot the real one before he finishes charging his attack, otherwise it's an insta-kill. Quite a cool boss, quite complicated. Arena is really frustrating to deal with, but other than that, 10 out of 10. It does take us a few attempts to take him down, but we eventually find this nice little section that I can camp in and kite him in, and take cover in whenever I need to kill all of his ads, and then we take him down. Honestly, one of my favorite bosses. Now, unfortunately, since Corsus is indeed an optional planet, it's quite short. So at this point, we've already managed to make our way to the final boss of Corsus, the Twin Bugs. I know they've got a name, I don't know how to pronounce their name. Now, on paper, these guys seem pretty complicated. They're super easy. Honestly, I would say these guys are even easier than the Unclean one. All of their attacks are super telegraphed and super slow. And they are one of the few bosses in the games whose ad summons isn't really considered an ad summon. They summon a bunch of wisps that you gotta take down, otherwise they'll swarm you and kill you, but it's not hard at all. They die to one hit from anything. And to top it all off, they have this charge attack that makes them take massively increased damage. It can be a little tricky if you're not able to do the damage check, but with the hunting rifle, precision is king, and if they have a weak point, hitting it with hunting rifle is going to do a lot of damage. So if anything, this just makes them easier to kill. Now, I do die one time to these guys, because I was stupid and not paying attention. But other than that, second try, get it done, final boss is easy. Twin Bugs are a bit of a joke. The only thing you've got to be careful of is to not lose track of the guy behind you, because you'll have one in front of you and one behind you. The guy behind you will shoot lasers at you if you're not careful. But other than that, easy peasy, no problem at all. With the Twin Bugs out of the way, we quickly run back to the Queen, give her the heart she was asking for, complete that quest, and get ourselves a nice bit of experience and scrap. And with that, Corsus is already done. Crazy. Off to the final planet, Yaisha? But the Forest Planet. This is why I just call it Forest Planet. I don't know what to call it. This planet's a little annoying. A lot of its dungeons are really difficult, and not in the fun way. It's just a bunch of ranged ads that one-shot you. But it's also not the worst in the world. The thing with Yaisha is that their dungeons are insanely difficult compared to the last couple. The ramp has continued, and now it's just a bunch of ads that are just obnoxious to deal with. I don't know if it's because I've been recording for a while or what, but this first dungeon kicked my ass. I just could not stop dying, and I was getting really frustrated. But eventually I decided to take a break, came back a little bit later, and I finished up that dungeon no problem. I just had to take a step back and relax. Funnily enough, the end of that dungeon was yet another siege survival. This one wasn't hard either. It killed me a few times. It's a very, very short, but also very, very intense and very, very quick. You gotta make sure that you're killing the waves as they spawn, otherwise you will get overwhelmed. After a couple attempts, I managed to kill them all, and we moved on. I did, however, pick up the headdress that was dropped. The reward was an armor piece, and I didn't remember what it did, so I decided to pick it up, even though I wasn't supposed to. After that, we immediately managed to enter yet another siege. This one is scripted, so you have to do it. So that brings our total up to, drumroll please, 5 different sieges in one run. That's crazy. I'm pretty sure I had to do every siege in the game possible in one run. Every one of them. Oh boy. This final siege is the one where you're supposed to aid the rebels. As I said, it's scripted. It can be quite annoying to get through because it's a lot of enemies, a lot of archers, a lot of elites, very easy to get overwhelmed. The allies that you're supposed to be helping don't really do anything, they just die. I don't even know if they help you at all. I've seen them every once in a while, but they don't do anything, they just die. I did get a little bit lucky though, and we managed to get through it on our 4th attempt. Could have been way worse, and I'm very happy with that result. Now the next encounter on my path to Ford is a little weird. Siren Scald, typically that duo is kind of troublesome to deal with. It's not the most complicated boss in the world, but it can be quite annoying because the archer likes to move around a lot, and he's got a good amount of health. I also managed to get unlucky and spawned him in as Regenerator, which meant if I didn't keep up the pressure, he was just going to heal a lot over time, which would have made this boss really, really annoying. However, for some reason, I kind of just sat in this the entire time and ran in a circle. He would run down the stairs, he would run up the stairs, and then jump down. That's all he would do, stopping to shoot me every once in a while. So I guess I got kind of lucky there. Other than that, it wasn't too noteworthy, other than me trying to use fire ammo against a dude that was made of fire. But because he was doing that little roundabout thing, the fight was super easy, and we ended that fight without it even being close. Ooh, no. Okay, it was a little closer than I would have liked, but I digress. We still managed to get through it. And this next encounter is number 2 on my list of least favorite bosses, the Warden. The Warden is once again an absurdly simple boss. For some reason is just so dumb to fight. The issue with the Warden is that he's a giant damage check. He's quite simple. He's basically just another spear thrower. He has all of their same attacks, except with the added on of being able to throw a bunch of bells. And every single time he tosses a bell, he summons adds. And if you let too many of these bells get onto the field, the waves he summons are stronger, deal more damage, and he also enhances them if too many are on the field after a short while. This makes it just a big game of, are you able to deal enough damage before he throws another bell? Aren't? Then you're screwed. And this fight is so annoying. There is so much to keep track of. And as I said, if you're not able to deal enough damage, you're just screwed. Let's hop it off. This fight has 2 major bugs in it. Bug number 1 is the bells themselves. They both involve the bells, actually. My bad. Bug number 1 is if you kill a bell with a dot, it makes an obnoxious noise until the dot goes away. It's very loud, very obnoxious, and it can make you miss sound cues if you're not careful. Bug number 2 is that sometimes he'll wedge himself into a corner when he tosses a bell, and that bell will get stuck inside the terrain and become invulnerable. And at that point, it's just a wipe. This boss is so obnoxious. It takes us quite a long time to get through this fight too. Eventually, I just have to toss on all of my damage gear and just hope for the best. Now luckily for me at this point, I have the Jewel of the Black Sun and the Hunter's Brand, which is honestly 2 of the best rings in the game, on top of the Vengeance. Now this Vengeance idol has become a new mainstay of my necklaces, sorry, not ranks. It increases all damage by 30% when you're below 50% health, or when you're at 50% or below 50% health. This is really good. Fortunately, this means I am just back to being Glass Cannon, and one hit kills me from this point forward. After a couple of attempts, we do manage to get through it. Not fun, not interesting, and I'm just glad to be done with it. Along the way to the final boss, we do come across a bell puzzle, and it's actually quite funny. I don't know these bell puzzles off the top of my head, it's been too long, but I did look up a little bit of a guide to get through this. I forgot to close this guide, and halfway through one of the dungeons, it played an ad that scared me and caused me to die.
Am I picking up a hint of citrus on the palate?
Light and effervescent.
A light beer that's serious on flavor and light on serious. Blue Moon.
Okay. But other than that, we make our way to the Ravager, the final boss of the Forest Planet. Now this is also an optional boss fight, and it's actually quite interesting because most of the time I just take the optional way out, because I prefer his optional rewards compared to his normal reward. But due to rule number 2, we actually have to fight him. Now, because of the way I used to deal with this boss, I don't have a lot of experience with him. So despite this boss not being all that complicated, it took me quite a while to get through him. He's got quite a few attacks. He has this charge attack once he gets close enough, and then several melee combos that will one-shot you if you're too close. After he gets to a certain amount of health, he will enhance himself and then give himself the ability to slam on the ground and do this massive area of effect lightning attack that you've got to roll at the right time, otherwise it will kill you. And then throughout the fight, sporadically, he will disappear into the jungle, come out at a random location with a bunch of his buddies that you'll have to kill. Now, as I said, this boss isn't too complicated. It's just a matter of a lack of experience that I realized that I should have fought him a couple more times just to be a bit better prepared. This fight took me, I want to say, about an hour, embarrassingly enough. It wasn't really anything other than the fact that I just didn't have the timings down and I kept making stupid mistakes. But eventually we figured everything out, we got the timings down, and we managed to get through it no problem. Now with this final barrier down, we finally meet Ford. We talk to Ford, steal his keys, and rush off back to Ward 13. Now Ward 13, we finally jump through the mirror, and we're off to the final boss of the game. And unfortunately, this is where we get to boss number 3 that I hate. This boss sucks. And not as in a difficult way, not as in anything other than it's just boring. This boss is dreadfully boring. It has 2 parts. Part 1, he slowly floats at you, and if he gets too close, he will do a spin attack that is really easy to avoid. He sporadically summons adds, but they're very slow and they don't really do all that much, and they also go down really easily. He has 2 ranged attacks, one is like a mortar, and one is a shockwave attack. Once again, both of them are very easy to dodge. He has this one spin attack that he sucks at you close to him, and then he does a slam attack. This is probably the most difficult one to dodge, but if you're far enough away, it won't hit you. And to top it all off, this boss has abysmally low health in the first stage. It doesn't take us very long at all to get through this first phase. I do actually die once to his shockwave attack because I wasn't paying attention. But we go back into it the second time and clear through this part 1, no problem at all. Phase 2 manages to be even worse than phase 1. He goes into the sky and becomes this big giant nightmare butterfly, tosses these giant meteors at you, and every once in a while throws you to the Shadow Realm because he's tired of looking at you. Throughout the entire course of this boss fight, everything is so easy and so slow. And you can't do anything to this guy until he sends you to the Shadow Realm. The only thing you can do is stand there and wait for him to shoot these slow meteors at you, which you can literally, if you're far enough away, you can literally walk out of them. They're not hard to dodge at all. And once he does send you to the Shadow Realm, all you have to do is kill a bunch of creatures and then jump back through the portal and shoot him a bunch. This is his only attack, is shooting those meteors at you. That's the only thing he can do. Now, while you're in the Shadow Realm, you will lose health over time, but it's very easy to just drink a Blood Wart, get 10 kills, hop back through the portal, and break his armor. Now, we do this 3 times, and the boss dies. And it's very disappointing that this winds up being the final boss, but at the very least, we did manage to answer the question. Yes, you can defeat the entirety of Remnant from the Ashes with only the hunting rifle, and it only took 92 ammo boxes and 125 deaths. Regardless, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Adios, boys.